All right, so we're diving into this public information officer training manual.
Yeah.
And, exploring how to get the right information out during emergencies
Right.
to the right people at the right time.
Exactly.
When every second counts, it's all about communication. As they say, it's not just what you say, but how you say it.
Absolutely, that's true. And
Yeah.
what I think is fascinating here is that emergency communication, it has its own unique set of rules.
Oh,
You think about it, you wouldn't deliver a hurricane warning the same way you'd announce a park cleanup.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right.
Right.
Yeah, what makes it so different, though?
Well, it's
still just words.
it's more than just words. It's about
Right.
conveying information in a way that's clear, concise, and, most importantly, actionable.
Right.
Especially when lives are on the line.
Yeah.
And this manual lays out a really interesting model.
Okay.
It's called the 8-step strategic communications model.
8 steps? Wow, that sounds pretty comprehensive.
It is.
Where do we even begin with that?
Well, the first step
Yeah.
is the most crucial, and that is assessing the situation.
Okay.
You need to gather all the information you can, the who, what, where, when, and why of the emergency.
So it's like detective work. You got to put all those pieces together
Exactly.
before you can even communicate anything.
Yeah, and a great example of how not to do this is
Yeah.
the 3 Mile Island incident back in 1979.
Oh, vaguely. I remember that.
Remember that?
Nuclear power plant, right?
Yes, it was a nuclear plant. There was a partial meltdown.
Right.
And the communication was just a complete mess.
Yeah.
Conflicting information, a lack of transparency, really eroded public trust,
Wow.
amplified the crisis. It's a classic case study in how crucial that first step, assessment, really is.
Wow. So getting the facts straight right from the get-go, that's super important.
It is.
But once you have the information...
Then you go to step 2, defining your goals and objectives.
Yep.
And not just any goals. We're talking SMART goals.
Okay.
Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound.
Oh, I love a good acronym. Helps me remember things.
Yeah.
But how does that actually apply to, like, a wildfire, let's say?
So let's say you have a wildfire that's approaching a residential area.
Right.
Your goal is to get people to evacuate safely, right?
Right.
So a SMART objective might be to have 90% of residents evacuated within the next hour.
Okay, so it's very clear, measurable,
Exact.
makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do you reach all those people?
Well, that brings us to identifying your audience.
Right.
You need to know who you're talking to, their demographics, their
Yeah.
preferred channels.
You're not going to send, like, a text message to a senior center to evacuate.
Exactly.
You're going to call them.
Exactly. You got to understand your audience and tailor your communication accordingly.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
This 8-step model, though, it seems like a lot. Especially when you're in the middle of an emergency. Everything's moving fast.
It can seem overwhelming, but think of it this way.
Okay.
A little planning up front can save you a lot of headaches later.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
Like you wouldn't just build a house without a blueprint.
Right. You need a plan.
Yeah, that's what this is. It's a blueprint for effective communication during emergencies.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So we've got, like, the first 3 steps down.
Mm.
Assessing the situation, defining your goals, identifying your audience.
Uh-huh.
What's next? This is where things start to get interesting, right?
Absolutely. Step 4 is developing and pre-testing your messages.
Okay.
And here's where things get tricky. You need to craft messages
Right.
that are clear, concise, easy to understand, even under stress.
Yeah, and no jargon.
No jargon.
Right. I remember reading about that in the manual.
Exactly. Avoid jargon, technical terms.
Okay.
Anything that could confuse people.
Got it. Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
But how do you pre-test a message in the middle of an emergency?
Well, that's a great question. Pre-testing can involve running your messages by colleagues,
Okay.
community leaders, even focus groups, just to make sure they're clear and understandable.
So you're getting feedback before you hit send,
Okay.
basically.
Exactly.
Okay, so once you've got your message, you're ready to go.
Right.
Then what? How do you actually get it out there?
Selecting your channels and activities, that's step 5.
Okay.
And this is where things get interesting because we have so many options these days.
Yeah, we do. You've got your old school newspapers, radio.
Yeah.
But then you've got social media, text alerts,
Websites.
the list goes on and on.
Right. And the key is to choose the right tool for the job. You wouldn't
Right.
use a hammer to screw in a light bulb.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
So if you're trying to reach a younger audience, you might use social media.
Right.
But for seniors, you might rely on radio or landline calls.
Exactly.
It's not knowing your audience and reaching them where they are.
Makes sense. So this is feeling very strategic. It's not just yelling fire.
Not at all.
In a crowded theater anymore?
Nope.
Right.
There's a lot of thought that goes into effective emergency communication.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
So we've got the message, we know our audience, we've chosen our channels. Then what?
Step 6, developing your action plan.
Okay.
That's where you map out the who, what, when, where, and how of your communication strategy.
Okay, so that's like the roadmap.
Exactly.
To getting that message out.
And also backup plans.
Right.
Contingency plans.
What if the power goes out?
What if your primary communication channel fails?
Right. Always good to have a plan B.
Absolutely.
Especially in an emergency.
Yeah.
Okay, and then...
So then we go to step 7, developing and pre-testing your materials.
Wait, didn't we already pre-test, like, way back in step 4?
We did.
Right.
But this time it's about the specific materials you'll be using. Press releases, social media posts, website updates.
Okay. So this is like final dress rehearsal before opening night.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
It's your chance to make sure everything is in place, working properly.
Got it. Yeah. I'm starting to see how each step builds on the last one.
Exactly.
Kind of like you were saying, building a house. You need a solid foundation before you can put up the walls.
You got it.
Okay. So then we get to step 8, the final step.
Implementing, evaluating, and modifying.
Okay, so this is where you actually put the plan into action.
Exactly.
But it's not a one and done. You're constantly evaluating.
It's not a one and done. You got to constantly monitor the situation, gather feedback, and be ready to adjust your plan as needed.
So it's a continuous loop.
It is.
Of communication, feedback, and adjustment.
That's right, because in an emergency, things can change very quickly.
Right.
And you need to be able to adapt on the fly.
This 8-step model, it's really impressive. But
it is.
It sounds like it requires a lot of expertise.
It does.
Who's actually responsible for all of this?
That's where the Public Information Officer comes in, the PIO. They are the communication experts on the ground.
Got it.
The voice of the organization during an emergency.
Okay, so the PIO is like the conductor of the communication orchestra.
Exactly.
Sounds like a really important job.
It is.
What kind of skills does a PIO need?
Well, they need to be a strong communicator.
Okay.
Both written and verbal.
Of course.
Able to think clearly under pressure.
Makes sense.
Make quick decisions and comfortable dealing with the media.
Okay.
Yeah.
The manual also mentioned something called a Go Kit.
The Go Kit.
What's that?
It's a preparedness kit that every PIO should have.
Okay.
Filled with essential tools and information.
So like a superhero's utility belt.
That's one way to put it.
For communication, what kind of stuff goes in there?
Think of it like a mobile office.
Okay.
Laptops, chargers, backup batteries.
Okay.
Contact lists, emergency plans. Even like basic first aid supplies.
Wow.
Anything you might need to stay connected and communicate effectively in a crisis.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So it really is like the PIO is the central nervous system of communication during an emergency.
Exactly.
They're making sure the right information gets to the right people at the right time.
That's their job.
Okay, so we've talked about the 8-step model, the role of the PIO. I'm curious to see how all of this plays out in a real-world situation.
Yeah.
The manual does mention a couple of examples.
It does, and some of them are pretty sobering.
Oh, okay.
Like the Alejandra case.
Oh, right.
This is a tragic incident. Involved the death of an infant.
Yes.
And the way the emergency services handled communication, wow.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
Let's just say it wasn't their finest hour.
There was a lot of public outcry.
There was.
Yeah.
A lot of it stemmed from, inconsistent messaging, lack of transparency, poor media relations.
Wow.
Really highlighted how crucial clear communication is, especially in sensitive situations like that.
So it's not just getting the facts out there.
Yeah.
It's also how you deliver those things.
Excellent.
The tone you use.
That's right.
And then there was also the couch incident.
The couch incident, yes.
I think that was the one with the delayed response
That's right.
to a medical emergency.
Exactly. And again, poor communication played a significant role in how that unfolded. The manual actually uses these examples to illustrate what they call the 7 C's of crisis communication.
7 C's. Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's a good framework to keep in mind. Complete, correct, concise, courteous, clear, concrete, and considerate.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you're covering all your bases.
Yeah.
Not leaving anything out.
Exactly. In a crisis, every word matters.
This is really fascinating stuff.
It is.
We've already covered so much, the 8-step model, the PIO's role, real-world examples, even those 7 C's.
It's a lot.
It's clear that emergency communication is a lot more complex than I ever imagined.
It is a constantly evolving field, but the fundamental principles remain the same. Clear, consistent, and compassionate communication can truly make a difference in an emergency.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well said, well said. But let's dive a little deeper
Mm.
into the world of warning systems.
All right.
And, explore how we can debunk some common myths about public panic during emergencies after a quick break.
That's good.
All right, so we were talking about warning systems before the break.
Yeah.
And, those are pretty crucial, right?
They are.
They're the things that are supposed to get our attention when there's real danger.
Absolutely. They can be the difference between life and death.
Yeah.
The manual goes into quite a bit of detail about the different types of warning systems.
Okay.
Everything from the sirens we hear in towns to the alerts we get on our phone.
Yeah, those phone alerts, those can be startling. Sometimes. Like, I jump a mile when those go off.
Yeah, they get your attention.
But they do get your attention.
Yeah.
Which I guess is the point.
Exactly. They need to cut through the noise.
Right.
So to speak, you mentioned sirens. Those are part of what's called the Emergency Alert System, or EAS.
Right.
That's the system that broadcasts alerts over radio and television.
Got it.
Been around for decades.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So EAS is for the old school folks.
Yeah.
And then you've got WEA.
Yeah.
For those of us glued to our phones.
Pretty much WEA is a newer system designed specifically for mobile devices.
Right.
It's how you get those Amber Alerts, flash flood warnings, and those presidential alerts that everyone loves to talk about.
Oh, yeah, those presidential alerts. I remember when they first rolled those out.
Yeah.
Caused quite a stir.
Yeah, you want to make sure everyone's in the loop, though.
You do?
Especially in a national emergency.
What about social media? I mean, it seems like that's where everyone gets their news these days.
You're not wrong. Social media has become a really powerful tool for emergency communication.
Right.
You think about it.
Yeah.
You can share updates, photos, videos.
Real-time map?
Even real-time maps showing evacuation routes or shelter locations.
It's like having eyes and ears everywhere.
Yeah.
But how do you make sure people are actually seeing those messages? I mean, it's so easy to just scroll past.
That is the challenge, right?
Right.
It's about crafting your messages carefully.
Okay.
Using strong visuals, making sure they're easily shareable.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
The manual also mentioned this thing called IPWS.
IPWS, yes.
What is that?
That stands for Integrated Public Alert and Warning System.
Okay.
It's kind of like the brain behind all these different warning systems.
Got it.
Allows officials to send out alerts across multiple channels simultaneously.
So radio, TV, mobile phones?
Radio, TV, mobile phones, social media.
Okay, so like a master control panel.
Yeah, it's a powerful system designed to reach as many people as possible as quickly as possible.
That's pretty cool.
It is.
Okay, so we're talking about reaching people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about how the public actually responds during an emergency.
Yeah.
You always hear these stories like people panicking, running around like chickens with their heads cut off.
Right. There's this myth that when disaster strikes, everyone loses their minds and, chaos reigns supreme.
Right.
But the manual actually debunks that myth.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's more fiction than fact.
Pretty much. Research has shown that people are actually quite resilient.
Okay.
Resourceful during emergencies. In fact, there's often a surge in cooperation, a sense of community.
Okay, so it's more about coming together to help each other than like running around panicking.
Exactly. Think about it. You hear stories after every major disaster.
Right.
People helping their neighbors, sharing resources, volunteering their time.
Yeah, that is encouraging to hear.
It is.
So if panic isn't the problem, then what is?
The real culprit is often a lack of information or conflicting information when people don't know what's going on.
Right.
They start to fill in the blanks themselves, which leads to rumors, misinformation, spreading like wildfire.
Got it.
Yeah.
So clear communication is crucial, not just to inform people, but also to calm their fears.
Exactly.
Prevent those rumors from taking hold.
That's right. When people have the information they need, they can make informed decisions and stay safe.
Okay, so we've established clear communication is key.
It is.
During an emergency.
Yeah.
But how do you manage all that communication when you've got multiple agencies, different levels of government, all these different channels? I mean, it sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It can be, and that's why the manual dedicates a whole section to the Joint Information Center, or JIC.
Okay, we've touched on the JIC before, but let's really break this down.
Okay.
What is it and how does it work?
Think of it like the command center for all public information during an emergency. It's a physical or virtual location where representatives from all the different agencies come together to coordinate their communication efforts.
So it's like the central nervous system.
That's a great way to put it.
Of the emergency response, making sure everyone's on the same page.
Exactly. And the manual highlights the key functions of JIC, which include gathering, verifying, coordinating, and disseminating information.
So that sounds familiar. Those are the core responsibilities of the PIO.
Exactly. The JIC essentially brings together PIOs from all the different agencies to work collaboratively.
Got it.
Ensure a unified message is going out to the public.
So the manual mentions different types of JICs.
It does.
Can you elaborate on that?
The most common type is what's called the incident JIC, which is set up right at the scene of the emergency.
Got it.
You might also have virtual JICs, which connect people remotely using technology. And then for really large-scale events, you might have a national JIC, coordinating communication at the federal level.
So there's a JIC for every occasion.
Pretty much.
But let's get back to that incident JIC. The one you said was the most common? What's it actually like inside one of those?
Well, imagine a large room filled with desks, computers, phones, maps, whiteboards, people from all the different agencies.
Fire,
police, EMS, public health, even the Red Cross.
Wow.
Everyone's working together, sharing information, coordinating messages.
Wow. Sounds like a beehive of activity.
It can be, especially during a major incident. But the JIC is designed to ensure that communication is flowing smoothly.
Got it.
That everyone's working towards a common goal.
Makes sense. The manual has a great example of how a JIC can be used.
It does.
To coordinate communication during a major incident.
It does.
And they use a hypothetical hurricane scenario.
Right. And in that scenario, the JIC is activated well before the hurricane even makes landfall. They start by gathering information about the storm's track, potential impact, evacuation plans.
So they're getting ahead of the storm.
Exactly.
So to speak. Setting up a communication infrastructure.
That's right.
To keep everyone informed and safe.
Exactly. And as the storm approaches, the JIC becomes the central hub for all communication. Providing updates on the storm's progress, coordinating evacuation efforts, addressing any public concerns.
So it's like a well-oiled machine.
That's a great analogy.
Right. Everyone playing their part to ensure that information is flowing smoothly.
The manual really emphasizes teamwork and collaboration within the JIC.
Because you can't have everyone doing their own thing.
Exactly.
Sending out their own messages.
It's crucial to have a unified approach to communication. And the JIC provides that structure, the framework to make that happen.
This whole concept of the JIC is fascinating. You know, it really underscores the importance of coordinated communication during an emergency, but beyond the logistics, the structure. What about the human element within the JIC?
It's a great question. It's easy to get caught up in all the technology procedures. But we can't forget that the JIC is ultimately about people communicating with people.
Because behind every alert, every press release, every social media post, there's a human being that's impacted by the crisis.
Absolutely. And the manual emphasizes the importance of empathy. Understanding within the JIC, it's about recognizing that everyone involved.
The PIOs, the responders.
The PIOs, the responders, members of the public, everyone is going through a stressful experience.
So it's not just about getting the information out there. It's also how you deliver it. The tone you use.
You want to be informative, of course. But also reassuring, compassionate, understanding.
Makes sense. The manual talks about the importance of stress management.
It does.
Within the JIC, I can imagine working in that kind of environment. You'd need a break.
It's demanding, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to have systems in place to support the people working in the JIC.
Right.
Whether it's regular breaks, access to counseling services, or even just a quiet space to decompress.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly.
Well,
you got to take care of yourself.
You got to take care of yourself.
Before you can take care of others.
Before you can take care of others.
The manual goes into a bit of detail about the different roles within a JIC.
Okay.
You got your lead PIO, who's kind of like the conductor of the communication orchestra.
Right. We talked about the PIO before.
We did.
They're crafting the messages, working with the media.
Exactly. And then you've got the logistics team, who's responsible for all the behind-the-scenes stuff.
Okay.
Setting up the JIC, managing the technology, making sure everyone has the resources they need.
They're the ones keeping the wheels turning.
Exactly. And then you've got the liaisons, who act as bridges between the JIC and the various stakeholders involved in the emergency response.
So they're communicating with other agencies.
Right.
Community organizations, elected officials.
Precisely.
Making sure everyone's in the loop.
Exactly.
Information's flowing smoothly.
That's right.
Between all the different parties.
Yeah.
It's really impressive how all these different roles come together to form this cohesive communication machine.
It's a testament to the power of collaboration and the essential role that communication plays in an effective emergency response.
Okay, so we've talked about the 8-step model, the PIO, the JIC.
Right.
It's clear there's a lot of planning and preparation that goes into managing communication during an emergency.
Absolutely.
But what about the actual act of communicating?
Yeah.
What are some key things to keep in mind when you're crafting messages?
That's a great question.
You know, whether it's a press release, a social media post, or even just a conversation with a member of the public.
Right. The manual goes into quite a bit of detail about the principles of effective communication, both written and verbal.
Let's start with written communication.
Okay.
Since that seems to be the foundation for a lot of the materials that are used during an emergency.
Right.
What are some of the key things to keep in mind there?
Well, the manual emphasizes the importance of clarity, conciseness, and accuracy.
Right. You don't want to be sending out confusing information in the middle of a crisis.
Exactly. And it's also important to use plain language, avoid jargon or technical terms that people might not understand.
Right, because not everyone's an expert in emergency management.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember reading something in the manual about like how people read online these days.
Yeah.
Most people just scan web pages. They look for keywords, headlines.
That's right. They're often looking for quick answers or specific pieces of information, especially during an emergency. So it's crucial to structure your online content accordingly. You know, use clear headings, bullet points, concise language.
It's almost like you're writing a news article.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting the information across quickly.
Yeah.
Effectively.
The manual also highlights the importance of using multimedia.
Okay.
Things like photos, videos, infographics.
Right, because visuals are super important.
Visuals can be a powerful way to convey information.
Yeah.
Especially for those who are just scanning for key points.
Right, a picture's worth 1,000 words, especially when you're trying to communicate something complicated quickly.
Yeah.
And when you're crafting messages for those warning systems we talked about earlier.
Yes.
The manual stresses the importance of being clear, concise, and actionable.
Yes.
Actionable. What does that mean?
It means telling people exactly what they need to do to stay safe.
Okay.
You know, don't just say there's a tornado warning in effect.
Right.
Tell them to take shelter immediately in a basement or an interior room on the lowest floor of their building.
So give them clear instructions.
Exactly.
They can follow in the moment.
In the heat of the moment.
Right.
And the manual also emphasizes establishing a trusted sender. Yeah. You know, people are more likely to believe and act on information if it comes from a credible source.
Like a government agency.
A government agency, a recognized emergency management organization.
Okay, so it's all about building trust.
Yeah.
Credibility. Especially in a crisis.
Absolutely.
When people are looking for guidance and reassurance.
That's right.
Speaking of trust, let's talk about the relationship between emergency communicators and the media.
Okay.
Because that can be a little complicated.
It can be.
At times.
It can. The media has a job to do.
They do.
Which is to inform the public.
Right.
But sometimes it feels like they're more interested in sensationalizing stories than getting the facts straight.
Yeah, and the manual acknowledges that tension.
It does.
Talks about building strong relationships with the media before an emergency even happens.
Exactly. Because when a crisis hits, you don't want to be scrambling to establish trust and rapport with reporters who are already breathing down your neck.
Right. It's much better to be proactive than reactive.
Yeah.
So what are some tips for, like, cultivating those relationships with the media?
Well, the manual suggests inviting reporters to tour your facilities, attend industry events where you can network with media professionals, or even just grabbing coffee with a reporter to chat about current events.
Just building those relationships.
Building those personal connections. Establishing a foundation of trust and mutual respect.
Okay, so you've built that good relationship with a reporter.
Right.
And then a crisis hits. Now what? How do you manage that interaction?
Well, the manual stresses the importance of understanding the media's needs.
Okay, which are?
During an emergency.
Right, during an emergency.
Reporters need access to information.
Okay.
They need timely updates. They need to be able to talk to key personnel.
Got it.
Sometimes they need access to the scene of the incident itself.
But sometimes that's not possible, right?
Right. Sometimes you need to restrict access.
For safety?
For safety reasons, or to protect the integrity of an investigation.
So how do you handle that?
Well, the manual suggests establishing media staging areas where reporters can gather and receive updates.
Got it.
Creating media pools where a small group of reporters is allowed access to a sensitive area.
Right.
And then they share their footage with other media outlets.
So you're finding a balance between providing access and ensuring safety.
And communicating those restrictions. Clearly and respectfully to the media.
One thing that makes me nervous is the thought of doing a media interview during a crisis.
I hear you. Not everyone's comfortable with public speaking, especially in a high-pressure situation like that.
Exactly.
But the manual actually has some really helpful tips on interview skills.
Okay, I'm all ears.
For PIOs, it all starts with preparation.
Okay.
Before you even step in front of a microphone or a camera, you need to understand the request. Anticipate potential questions, develop talking points.
Got it.
Convey your key messages.
So you're prepping like you're prepping for a test.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the manual also stresses the importance of practice.
Right.
Even just running through your talking points
in a mirror.
A few times in the mirror can make a big difference in how confident and composed you feel.
Right. Practice makes perfect.
Exactly. And the manual also provides some tips on nonverbal communication.
Like what?
Making eye contact, modulating your voice.
Right.
Using open and engaging body language.
Yeah, body language speaks volumes.
It does, especially when you're on camera.
Especially on camera.
Yeah, it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it.
Right.
Tone of voice, facial expressions, posture, all those things can convey confidence, empathy, even uncertainty.
Yeah, it's all about how you present yourself.
It is.
Both verbally and non-verbally.
Exactly. And the manual also emphasizes staying calm and composed.
Right.
Even if the interviewer is being aggressive or hostile.
Which can be tough.
It can be.
Especially in a stressful situation.
It can, but losing your cool will only make things worse.
Yeah.
The manual suggests taking a deep breath.
Right.
Pausing before you answer and focusing on your key messages.
Staying in control.
Staying in control of the conversation, even when it feels like it's spiraling out of control.
Right.
Sticking to the facts, avoiding speculation or conjecture.
You don't want to add fuel to the fire.
Exactly.
With misinformation.
Absolutely. And the manual also emphasizes never lying.
Okay.
Or making promises you can't keep.
Right. Honesty and integrity are super important.
They are, especially during a crisis.
Well, especially in a crisis.
When trust is paramount.
Exactly. The manual even gives some helpful alternatives.
It does.
To using that dreaded no comment phrase.
Yes.
Which can sound evasive.
It can.
Wait, it can. Uncooperative.
Yeah.
So what are some of the alternatives?
Well, the manual suggests explaining why you can't answer the question. Offering to provide more information later, or even bridging to a related topic that you are comfortable discussing.
So finding a way to be responsive?
Exactly.
Without compromising the integrity of the emergency response.
That's right. And the manual also stresses the importance of documenting everything.
Okay.
Keeping records of your interactions with the media, saving copies of all press releases and other materials.
So in the event of a dispute,
exactly,
you have a clear record.
You have a clear record of what was said and when.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that always seems to come up in media interviews is the issue of misquotes.
Yes.
Or inaccurate reporting.
Right.
Which can be frustrating.
It can be.
When you see something in print or hear something on the news, that's not what you said or not what's actually happening.
It's like a game of telephone where the message gets distorted as it passes from person to person.
Right, exactly.
The manual provides some guidance on how to handle those situations.
Okay, like what?
Well, it suggests contacting the reporter or the editor to clarify the information or request a correction.
Got it.
And emphasizing the importance of doing so calmly and professionally.
Right. You don't want to get into a shouting match.
No.
With a reporter.
Exactly. Focus on the facts, avoid personal attacks.
Makes sense.
And the manual also stresses the importance of using social media to correct misinformation or clarify your position.
Right. Social media can be a double-edged sword, right?
It can.
It can be a great tool for getting information out.
It can.
But it can also be a breeding ground for misinformation.
Absolutely. But by monitoring social media carefully, responding promptly to inaccurate information, you can help mitigate the damage. Ensure accurate information is being shared.
Okay, so we've talked about building relationships with the media. Preparing for interviews. Handling those misquotes. But what about the bigger picture? How do you manage communication during a full-blown crisis?
Right. When the stakes are high and the pressure's on.
That's where crisis communications comes in.
That is where crisis communications comes in.
Okay, so what is that exactly?
It's a specialized field that focuses on communicating effectively during a crisis. Managing the flow of information, mitigating damage to reputation, and ultimately guiding the organization through the storm.
So it's like a combination of public relations.
It is.
Crisis management. Strategic communication.
All rolled into one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It does.
So the manual has some good insights.
It does.
Into how to develop a crisis communication plan. So what are some of the key elements of that?
Well, it starts with identifying potential crises that could impact your organization. Think about natural disasters, technological failures, even reputational threats.
Like accusations of misconduct.
So you're basically doing a risk assessment.
Exactly.
Figuring out what could go wrong.
What could keep you up at night.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you've identified those potential crises.
Then you develop key messages and talking points that address those specific scenarios.
So you're not just winging it.
You're not winging it.
When a crisis hits, you've already got a plan in place.
You have a plan.
And the plan also needs to identify spokespeople.
It does.
Who are trained and ready to handle those inquiries.
Exactly.
Because you don't want just anybody stepping up to the microphone.
Not at all.
During a crisis.
No, you need someone who is calm, collected, articulate.
Right.
Someone who can convey your message effectively and reassuringly.
The manual also talks about speed and accuracy in crisis communication.
It does.
Why are those so important?
Because in today's world, information travels at lightning speed.
Right.
And any delay or misstep in your communication can quickly amplify a crisis.
Erode public trust.
So you really need to get ahead of the story.
You do.
Control the narrative.
Absolutely.
And make sure the information is accurate.
That's right.
That's going out.
And the manual reminds us that those 7 C's of crisis communication are just as important during a full-blown crisis.
Complete, correct, concise.
Complete, correct, concise, courteous, clear, concrete, and considerate.
That's right.
Yeah.
A good checklist to have.
A good checklist.
Right. Okay, so the manual also has some helpful tips.
It does.
On handling media inquiries during a crisis.
Yeah.
Like what?
Well, it suggests establishing a central point of contact. For all media inquiries. So reporters aren't calling every single person in your organization.
Makes sense.
Emphasizes being proactive in your communication. Reaching out to reporters instead of waiting for them to call you. And stressing the importance of providing regular updates on the situation.
Right, even if you don't have all the answers.
Even if you don't have all the answers.
No.
You know, sometimes just saying we're still gathering information is better than saying nothing at all.
Right, because silence can breed mistrust.
It can be interpreted as guilt or incompetence.
Right, exactly.
So it's about being open, transparent with the media, even when it's uncomfortable.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that really stood out to me in the manual was the section on the psychological impact of crises.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to get caught up in the logistics, the communication.
Yeah.
But we can't forget that behind all the statistics, the headlines, there are real people who are going through a really emotional and stressful experience.
Absolutely.
Right.
And the manual emphasizes the importance of empathy.
Right.
Understanding in crisis communication.
It's acknowledging the fear.
It is.
The uncertainty. The pain that people are going through.
And the manual provides some tips on how to communicate with compassion and sensitivity during a crisis.
Like what?
Well, it suggests using plain language, avoiding jargon, focusing on the needs of the audience, stressing the importance of being honest, transparent, even when you don't have all the answers.
Yeah, because in a crisis, people need to feel heard.
Yes.
And understood.
Absolutely.
Even if the situation is still unfolding.
That's right. And the manual also emphasizes providing practical information and resources to help people cope with the crisis.
Like information on shelters, evacuation routes.
Exactly.
Mental health support.
Exactly. Empowering people with information and resources to help them navigate the crisis and start to rebuild their lives.
This deep dive into crisis communications, it's been really eye-opening.
It has.
You know, it's clear that effective communication is more than just delivering messages.
It is.
It's about building trust, fostering understanding,
absolutely,
providing support during a time of great need.
It's about recognizing the human element in a crisis, responding with compassion and clarity.
Well said. Well said. Now let's wrap up this deep dive with a look at a very specific type of crisis communication, one that can be particularly challenging to manage, a crisis involving a risk of radiological contamination.
Yeah, that's a good one to discuss.
Right.
Those situations can be incredibly complex and sensitive, you know, given the public's fear and uncertainty surrounding anything nuclear.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah. The manual uses a hypothetical scenario.
It does.
Involving an alert at a nuclear power station. To kind of illustrate
how those complexities play out.
What are some of the key takeaways from that example?
Well, one of the biggest is the importance of clear and concise messaging, using plain language, avoiding any technical jargon that might confuse or alarm the public.
Okay, so it's the same principles of communication.
It is.
But the stakes are even higher.
The stakes are much higher in a radiological crisis.
And in addition to being clear and concise, you also need to be accurate and transparent.
You do.
In your communication.
Absolutely.
Addressing people's concerns directly. Providing specific instructions on how to stay safe.
That's right, because in a situation like that, rumors and misinformation can spread like wildfire, causing unnecessary panic and confusion.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The manual emphasizes coordinating your communication with other agencies.
It does.
You know, public health officials, environmental protection agencies.
All the stakeholders.
Right. Make sure everyone's on the same page.
Exactly.
There's a unified message going out to the public.
That's right. A unified message is crucial in any crisis, but especially in a situation involving radiological contamination.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful. It's clear that emergency communication.
It is.
It's a complex and challenging field. But it's also one that's incredibly important.
Incredibly important.
In a crisis, communication can be the difference between life and death.
Absolutely.
Between order and chaos.
You got it.
And while we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the basic principles of effective communication to the nuances of crisis management. The specific challenges of radiological events. There's always more to learn.
Always more to learn.
This Public Information Officer Training Manual has provided a valuable foundation.
It has.
But the real learning.
The real learning comes from experience, constantly striving to improve our communication skills.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what is one key takeaway that you hope our listeners will remember?
I think the most important takeaway is that effective communication is a skill that can be learned and practiced. You know, it's not something you're born with. It's something you develop over time. And the more you learn about the principles of effective communication, the better equipped you'll be to handle any crisis that comes your way.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to remember the human element of communication.
Yes.
Especially during a crisis.
Absolutely.
It's not just about delivering information.
No.
It's about connecting with people.
It is.
Acknowledging their fears and concerns. Providing them with the support and resources they need.
Absolutely.
To navigate the situation.
Beautifully put. Combining clear and accurate information with empathy and compassion.
This has been a fascinating exploration of the world of emergency communication.
Yeah.
A huge thank you to our expert for guiding us through this Public Information Officer Training Manual.
You're welcome.
Sharing your insights.
My pleasure.
And to all of our listeners, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
On this deep dive, we hope you found it informative.
Yes.
And empowering. And remember, knowledge is power.
It is.
The more you know about effective communication, the better prepared you'll be.
You will be.
To handle any crisis that comes your way.
That's right.
Stay safe and stay informed.
Absolutely.